Hello my quilting friends! My name is Leah Day and I am back with another video on ruler quilting on my Christmas tree quilt. So in the bottom of this Christmas tree quilt I have lots of presents, and this is pieced with glitter fabrics. Some of these I really don't want to stitch over because I don't really know, well, let's just say they're not going to heal from those holes. They're kind of sketchy. And this was just an experiment in playing with different fabrics and materials that I found at Hobby Lobby. And by no means do I know how this is going to work out long term. I actually kind of wonder if maybe I've made some choices that are going to result in a quilt that's not going to last very long. But you know, this is all a learning curve. This is all a learning experience. And I absolutely love how these glitter fabrics turned out on this quilt. So I'm very carefully doing some stitching in the ditch with my ditcher ruler, and I'm doing some very simple curving lines, some diagonal lines with my mini slide ruler as well. So in this video, I want to share some tips and tricks with you, just some different ideas and some trials that I have run into when working with this glitter fabric. Number one thing, if you decide to do this yourself, make sure to wash your hands and dust off your clothing every time you step away from glitter fabric. You do not want a piece of glitter to get in your eye. Trust me. Okay, so let's get started quilting with rulers over these glittery presents. So here is this pretty glitter fabric on my quilt, and this particular green was something I found at Hobby Lobby, and when I stitch through it, it leaves a permanent hole. So I definitely didn't want to do anything within that fabric. I just stitched it in the ditch and left it. This particular glitter fabric, it's kind of glitter glued to a canvas, and so I was able to stitch this, and I felt like the holes were healing enough that that was safe. It's not going to just tear along those holes. I feel like this particular fabric, if I stitched a line, especially at 16 stitches per inch, probably would end up tearing it rather than actually stitching it and securing it. So here you can see nice gentle curves, and I did that just simply lining up my mini slide ruler and stitching 2 lines parallel, and then doing the same thing through this area. This is a continuous curve ruler, so I was able to keep that curve going simply by rotating it around and continuing that curve that way. So now I have this nice big present, and this is pretty thick fabric, especially all of these seam lines coming together. And this is, again, that same kind of canvas material with glitter glued to the surface. I think that's really the best description for it. Lots and lots of seam lines, so I don't really want to stitch it in the ditch, particularly this seam over here seems to want to wing out. I'm feeling it, and obviously I can't see what's going on underneath the quilt surface. I can kind of feel in there, and it's not feeling right. I am right here on the edge of the quilt, so I could always stick my hand in there and wiggle the stuff around, but I'm already starting to kind of fight. It's fighting with me, basically. So I'm gonna just go ahead and concede defeat in this case, and I'm gonna let that seam allowance do what it wants to do. And instead of trying to stitch this area in the ditch, I'm gonna do something called echo ditching. And what echo ditching is, it can be 1/8 of an inch away, 1/4 inch away. With ruler quilting, it's just easier to do a 1/4 inch distance because, of course, we've got a ruler foot here on the machine. Ruler foot is 1/2 of an inch around with the needle in the center, so that gives you automatic 1/4 inch spacing. Really, really handy. So I'm going to go on ahead and just lock my threads in place, grab my ditcher ruler, and I'm just lining up. This is the side slot of the ditcher ruler, and I'm just lining this up. So that way I'm going to stay 1/4 inch from this seam line. So I'm just going to press my hand right along that edge, and I'm just going to pull, or I should say push, the machine away from me. And then I just shift it down and push the machine away. Now, as I'm coming up on that turn, I want to make sure that I don't overstitch, that I don't get too close to that edge. Of course, that's behind the foot visually, so it's hard for me to see. So I just try and get as close as I can without overshooting it. And then now I'm going to use this slot. This is special feature of the Ditcher ruler. It's really great when I'm doing these side to sides where I can't quite see my spacing, because this is going to help me stay exactly where I want to be, and I am staying exactly a 1/4 inch from that edge now. I love this. Sometimes it's a little tight, especially when the quilt gets thick. You know, combination of the quilt plus the ruler foot, everything. I don't know why, but sometimes it can just feel a little stuck. So just watch out for that. Now, as I come up here, I'm visually wanting to look and see and stop where the front of this ruler foot connects with that seam. And I don't really have a line to guide me etched on the ruler, so I'm just going to stitch carefully and slowly and then get to about right there and stop. And you can see that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted to stop so the edge of the ruler is a 1/4 inch away from that seam line. All right, now I'll go back to using this side area. It's a nice long stretch, and it just makes for a little bit of quicker, speedier quilting here. And another nice thing about doing this echo ditching versus doing stitching in the ditch is that I am avoiding these areas of super thick seam allowance. Definitely don't really want to be hitting that right now. So here we go. Click the machine back on. And if ever, you know, things feel stuck, I find that I tend to put a little bit too much pressure down on my ruler. I have to watch out for that. It's why I like to use, the setting I like to use on my stitch regulator is regulated cruise, and I like 16 stitches per inch. And I like the cruise mode just simply because it keeps the needle bouncing up and down whenever I have it on. I'm going to really quickly hide this thread tail here. I'm going to do this using a cheater needle. And yes, I do this even when I'm working with crazy glitter fabrics. I think it's an important step. Of course, it's kind of hard. This fabric is so thick. It's, you know, it's that canvas material. It really is thick and difficult to work with. So inserting this needle can be a little bit tricky. So I sometimes grab a pair of pliers, actually, to help me out. Let me grab them. I'll show them to you. So this is a great big honkin' Swiss Army knife that my dad gave me many years ago. And I like to pull out the pliers on it whenever I need help inserting a cheater needle. And you can see it just helps me have a little bit better grip on that needle. And then I can quickly pop those thread tails into the eye very gently so they don't split, and then I can grab the tip of that needle with the pliers and pull it through. There we go. I rarely have to do that, but when I do, it's always nice to have a helping hand from a tool. There we go. Clip that off and done. Okay, so now I'm going to stitch down, connect with this, and then I can decide what I want my design to be. I'm going to basically use this echo ditching as, whoop. Now what just happened there? That was kind of a catastrophe, and I'm probably, well, I should rip it out. I don't know. It kind of blends in so nicely with the glitter fabrics that I could probably get away with it. But it's like a blip. And I think the problem was I was putting just a little bit too much pressure on the ruler, and it just kind of gagged and didn't let the machine move smoothly. So I'm going to take a second here real quick to rip this out. Yeah, that stitching just, it's a big stitch and it doesn't look good. So I'm going to rip this out, plan my quilting design, and get back on track. We'll be right back. So it took a little time to fix that mistake, and now I'm thinking about the design that I want to do, and I think I want to stitch matrix using my mini slide ruler. So what I'm going to do is stitch down just a bit along this echo ditching. Probably just give myself, just kind of basically stitch right into the middle of this half square triangle, and I'm going to get this design started, kind of the element to it. And I'm going to do that by lining up. I have these etched lines on this ruler. I'm going to line that up with this seam line. And I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4 lines from the edge. And this is going to be different, obviously, for whatever quilt you're working on. But this just seems to make sense to me for this particular one. I'm going to kind of stitch this matrix in a grid on this quilt. So that's curvy line grid design. So I'm aiming to get right in the middle and go this direction. So again, I'm gonna look at these etched lines on the ruler, and I'm gonna count over and get to that line, line that line up on my seam line there. There we go. Shift that over just a bit. That looks good. Let's see here. If I you want to start right here? Yeah, I think that looks good. And now I'm just lightly pressing. I think the reason why I had that mistake is because I was pressing too firmly. And it's something that I just, I have a hard time with. I tend to press on my ruler like I put a death grip on it, guys. And it's something that I really need to loosen up on a little bit. You can keep the ruler in place, with a light hand. It doesn't have to be just a rock solid firm hand. You can have kind of a light grip on it, just fingertips, and it stay in place just fine. All right, so now that I have like a little foundation here and a little foundation here set for my design. So now I'm going to travel stitch over. And I want to grab my ditcher. I'm going to just interchange my rulers. The reason is I want to stay right on top of my travel stitching. There we go. That looks good. And I think I want an inch spacing between these lines. That's going to be a little tricky. So I'm going to need to focus on 3 lines from the edge of my ruler. So I have a 1/4 inch here plus 3 lines. That's a total of 1 inch. And this looks good. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be good enough. But I am going to hit that area of seam allowance. I got to watch out for that. And let's see here. How far down will I have to stitch to connect with that line? Looks like I was kind of in a curve there. You just have to kind of eyeball it and be like, well, that looks relatively good. So I need to stitch down to that point in order to connect with where that's supposed to go. So let's see if I can freehand it. I'm only moving the machine by about, what, 1/4 inch? So not very far in order to connect with where I want to go. There we go. Click back on. Ooh, loosen up, Leah. Whenever the machine stops moving, it's usually me. It's usually me holding it too hard, holding that ruler and pressing too hard. All right, now I'm going to stitch up, kind of guesstimating that 3/4 inch. Looks like I didn't stitch far enough. That's okay. I've got a straight edge on the end of this ruler. I can use that as a guide. That helps. And then now let's see here. Kind of connecting with what I did before. So I have that nice curve going. It looks like I need to take 1 stitch back and over. Already that's coming together, looking really nice. It's kind of a curvy, wiggly checkerboard. I love that. Okay, so the key here, you're seeing that I'm putting some lines this way and some lines this way, and there's not really a rhyme or reason to it. It's just whatever I see that I can go on ahead and stitch that direction, whatever is the closest line for me to stitch. And it looks like I need to do this one going in this direction now. And, so it's a little slow, and it's a little bit of kind of make it up as you go. And that's the thing about working on these presents, is I noticed I really slowed down a little bit as I've been working on them, because not only is the design within each of them slightly different, it is also, it's pretty persnickety quilting. I'm really trying to stay, keep it clean, keep it nice looking, and sometimes that means that I'm a little bit pickier than I would be otherwise, and so it's slowing me down just a bit. So here we go, one more line this way, and then I'll probably stitch a few lines in the opposite direction. There we go. Well, let's see here. It looks like, can I connect and do that line? Looks like I need to stitch up this way. I'll go take my ditcher ruler and go, oop, oop, oop. That's an area of a lot of seam allowance. You gotta watch out for those spots. Take it slow with your machine. Obviously don't stitch in one place for too long. Your machine won't like that. You won't like that, because it'll make a knot on the back of your quilt. That won't look good. All right, and I'm shifting this ruler over to see where we are. I'm just looking at the etched lines on the ruler. It looks like I'm 1/2 inch away, or 3/4 inch away right now. So I need to go up a little bit more this way. There we go. And like I said, this is very much, kind of, stitch a little bit, see where you are, stitch a little bit more, and then slowly the design starts to build. And this is what I love about it, is it's subtle, you know, it's glitter fabric. You're not going to really see a bold quilting design inside of that, and that's okay. This is really just for texture. You know, it's to have a little bit of security in this area, but really, honestly, it's just, you know, it's just that little touch of texture in this area. And I don't want to leave the presents all open and blank. That's why I didn't piece all of them out of that holographic material that I found. All right, one more line going this way, it looks like, and then probably one more line going in the opposite direction, and this area will be finished. So there we go. That looks great. And then I just need one more little wiggly line right over here. So let me stitch down, see where I need to go with that. I'm just travel stitching carefully along that line of echo ditching. And now I'll take my mini slide ruler one more time. And I'm just kind of eyeballing these curved edge lines, lining that up generally with that line I just stitched vertically, and then finishing that area off. There we go. I love that. I think that turned out great. Okay, so now we need to think about what we want to do in this area, and I'm thinking just some simple diagonal lines. So I'm going to break thread real quick here, and I do have another very detailed video on how I break thread, on how I hide my thread, so definitely check that out if you're watching this going, what is she doing? You know, how does that work? All that good stuff. All right, so yet again, I don't really want to, I don't really want to stitch this in the ditch if I can avoid it. As you can see, like right here, I'm already getting just a little bit of wear on my glitter fabrics. I think this is a different type. This was fused onto 100% cotton fabric. So I'm going to again echo ditch this and line up. The only difference here is that I'm going to do my straight lines more or less at the same time. So I like to take a few stitches, not in place, I'm moving the machine ever so slightly just so I'm locked in, and that way my bobbin thread doesn't get sucked down into the machine or to the back of the quilt. All right, and I'm just using my ditcher ruler again to line up. And in this case, I've got lines here etched at the end, and that helps me align that. Just simply because this direction, I'm left-handed, this direction just feels just a little awkward to me. I don't really want to hold the ruler in a direction that's going to feel super awkward. I probably won't make the best looking stitches if the ruler or the movement feels uncomfortable. And it's okay if the line gets a little off. I'm telling that to myself. And also just don't death grip it, Leah. Come on. You can be nice and light, nice and loose. There we go. I'm going to get a 1/4 inch away from this, and then I'll stitch down, and we'll start our first diagonal line. And I think those diagonal lines would look really good if they were like pinstripes. But here's the other thing that I have learned is that, you know, and if you are quilting a space and you have a channel, you know, you have a channel to fill, it really pays to go on ahead and stitch kind of evenly. So stitch to both sides and stitch the middle rather than going ahead and starting a pattern. Otherwise you can end up with it being slightly off, like the line's not fitting consistently. So yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go on ahead and stitch down. And this is a little trickier because, of course, how do you know what to line up with? Well, here I've got a seam line back here from how I pieced these squares. So I'm going to line up my ditcher ruler so that the line through the middle of that pocket, there's like an etched line here that corresponds with right in the middle of that pocket. I'm lining that up with that seam junction. And if I line that up, then that helps me stay nicely on the diagonal. There we go. And honestly, this might be enough quilting. I mean, it's a nice dramatic difference from the matrix that I stitched with the mini slide ruler in the pink area, and I think that's a kind of a nice contrast. I don't know that I necessarily need to stitch more than just 3 lines in this area, so I'm going to have, you know, just the line on the edge, this line in the middle, and then one more on the edge. That might be plenty. You know, sometimes less is more. You don't need to clobber your quilt with too much quilting. And this is something that we definitely will talk about in quilting the background, if I share how to do that in a video, because, you know, it's really easy to just get, you know, kind of come at it, any sort of special wall hanging style quilt, and just really overstitch it, you know, overdo it. And I really don't want to do that. Number one, I don't have time to do that. I don't have a lot of time to put into this. I really want it done by Christmas so I can enjoy it on my wall this season. And, you know, it just doesn't seem like there's much of a point of just putting too much quilting into any particular area. And especially with this glitter fabric, I have no idea what it's going to do. But the good news is it's not causing my thread to break. I was really worried about that, actually. I was thinking that I might just end up stitching in the ditch all of this stuff because I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do anything in it without my thread breaking constantly. And as you can see, it hasn't broken at all. I had that one mess up because I was pressing the ruler too firmly, but that was it. All right, so there we go. That's that section knocked out. I'm pretty pleased with that. And I think that, you know, sometimes less is more. We don't really need to go overboard with tons and tons of quilting in any particular area, especially when you're working with very specialty fabrics, something very unusual, you're experimenting with something. Sometimes, and as you can see, these seam lines are still giving me some trouble there. Sometimes less is more. And so I really think that just having, you know, just those 3 lines in that section, that's plenty. I love the matrix in this section. I'm going to go on ahead and finish that off over here too. And this is just absolutely perfect. So I hope that this has inspired you to give these rulers a try and play with different designs in your quilts. So that's it for this video. My name is Leah Day. If you'd like to learn more about the rulers that I used in this video, you can find them at leahday.com/ruler. I have been quilting on my Qnique 21. This is a Big Daddy long arm on my continuum frame. I absolutely love this setup. So if you'd like to learn more about it, come and check it out at leahday.com/21. Until next time, let's go quilt.